We are so good about inspiring each other artistically because it's tangible, it's visible. I can watch a video and be inspired and be blown away, and that will give me some juice to that'll fuel the next artistic choice that I make.
I get it, 100%.
But we don't always get the leadership.
Oh, snap. It's my big brother, Jay.
What's up, man?
You look beautiful.
Ah, you're too kind. I've got a filter on, so, also helps.
Nice. So I'm excited to talk to you, Jay, because one, I've known you for 5 years now, which is a long time for me to know people. And you you were quickly one of my best friends, coming up, a mentor figure for me, a big brother. I mention you a lot in conversation to other people, just because I think so highly of you. And I'm excited to hear more about your story, to share what it is with you. I think that you have a nice balance of being behind the scenes, but also being a leader in the front of the community. And I think more people need to know who you are and what you have to give them. And I'm really excited because Elijah, is going to grow up loving you so much. And so for him to see these kind of conversations behind closed doors, it should be pretty cool for him to see. So thanks for doing this for me, man.
Oh, man. And I mean, so many nice words. I don't even know how to absorb all of that. But when I think about the last 5 years, for sure, and being in this community for almost 20, like you and I, like you said, were people who just clicked very quickly. So, I love our friendship. We're going to be lifelong friends. And I love you, man.
Brothers. It's really cool. And I, before we get into kind of intros and some of the history on you and so people understand kind of where you're coming from. The thing that I love about our relationship, our friendship, is you met me when, before Taylor, before the baby, you've seen that transition with me. You've been a confidant of mine and, advice giver through all lost steps. And even more recently, when I'm talking about professional changes and opportunities, that's something I'm really excited to talk to you about too, because one of the reasons why we click is not only are you a leader in the dance community, right? Not just San Diego, SoCal, but in the world, people know your name as they should. But I think one of the reasons why our friendship has such depth is because we have similar family experiences. We both have chosen professional careers on top of our balance with dance and our passions. So there's a lot of overlap there. So here's what I know about your history, Jay, and then you fill in the blanks for me and everyone else, okay? Okay. So born and raised San Diego, loves hip hop. Hip hop loves Jay. Founder of All Male at which high school?
Morse High.
At Morse High, which is, anyone who doesn't know, All Male is an all-male dance team at a high school, which has now branched out to multiple chapters in the high schools in San Diego. And I would say it's probably one of the reasons why the pipeline of strong dancers in that community is as strong and as deep as it is now. So Jay started that. Jumping forward a little bit, was on Formality. I think you were on FX for a little bit. And then SGBM, which is how I know you, directed. And I got to be directed under you for like a few months before your retirement. So checkbox there. And then on top of that, you were a store manager for an Old Navy. Now you're working the merch or the, what would you call it? Artistic visuals. And it's a really great thing. And I've got to see you kind of, grow up into that position as well. So, what am I missing? What do people need to know about you before we dive into content?
Born in the Philippines, actually.
I didn't know.
but yes, raised in San Diego. I live in Long Beach now, and I moved for the job. But yeah, you got that right. All male, founded Morse All Male. It was the second all male team in San Diego. And then, the subsequent years, many teams all over SoCal branched. And I think I didn't realize what that looked like until I looked back a few years ago. But yeah, I joined Formality when I was in high school, my senior year, when I was wrapping up all male.
So was Formality, because you were in it from the outside? I was on the East Coast when Formality was kind of in its stride. That was the coolest place to be as a young man. Is that how it felt on the West Coast?
I think I was so young, and I was still understanding what like the dance community really meant. And there were so few teams anyway. I didn't have a lot of choices post high school. It was honestly either Formality or 220. And I just happened to have friends on Future Shock who told me, you should go audition for Formality. Let's go to Fusion Dance Comp and watch them so you know what you're auditioning for next week. Lo and behold, they won first place at that competition. And I was like, I'm auditioning for that team. Like, are you kidding me? So it was definitely a cool opportunity, but I never felt that way. I was just so eager, hungry to like learn and embrace something outside of like what I knew in high school. Yeah. So that was very cool. And then when I was on Formality, I was assisting Eric Saradpan with a lot of his classes because just an eager beaver. And then Angie Bunch offered me my first class at the newly opened Culture Shock Dance Center when it opened in 2003. So shout out to Angie and the whole Culture Shock organization because I never danced for the team, but I've always had such close ties to many of the members, and then their styles influenced me so much as a young dancer. So I
mean, they were huge in the community. We'll talk a little bit about the NAPKIN in a little bit. I think that besides everything else, kind of cements your place in history of being the one that documents part of that. And I would say that besides being a leader in the dance community, you've been a historian, probably one of the few that are vocal about the history, who understand it was there firsthand. And so, a lot of people don't even know Formality anymore, which is unfortunate. I was traveling in Europe, a couple of OGs knew Formality. Yeah. But Formality had the heavy hitters, like almost any of your favorite choreographers today has a connection either directly or indirectly to Formality, right? Like,
yeah, that's absolutely true. And again, Formality and Eric heavily, influenced by Culture Shock. So I can't wait to get to the NAPKIN. Yeah. But yeah, I joined what I would probably call like the next generation of like young newbies. I joined in 2002, where all of the majority of the original dancers were still on the team, but they were hitting their mid and late 20s and, kind of like the end of their dance journeys, I'd say. And so when I joined, and then the year and 2 years after me, we brought on a very, very young Philip Janizas and Ving Wins and, Will Ortegas and so many other dancers that kind of moved on to, Keonis, that came on and, we all know what happened to them thereafter, but yeah, it was, and even the generations after that, I think about when Formality moved to Temecula a few years later, and then we got the Kevin Wins and the Paul Rosses and the Gerald Georges. So there was Formality certainly helped bring up a lot of great dancers in San Diego.
Stacked so heavy. And then I guess let's kind of segue into the NAPKIN. So anyone who doesn't know, so to me, this was urban legend, right? I mean, that's kind of how it was. Because I was on the East Coast and I remember getting into dance. My first time starting to train for dance was in Culture Shock DC, right? A lot of my foundation comes out of there. And I think that's why, especially if you're a little bit older too, you have more chances to get to foundation and different styles. And Culture Shock as a whole organization was pretty consistent across the board with those styles. And I'm so thankful for that. But I heard about the napkin. What is the napkin? How did that night or that day or that event come to happen? And I'll share a screenshot in a little bit.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think we were blown away at like how far this napkin spread, because at the time, social media surely didn't have the same presence it does today. But so I was on SGBM, or I was directing SGBM at the time, and a good friend of mine, Sean Mamihe, who I danced with since Formality.
And he's amazing.
Yes, one of my oldest and one of my most favorite friends in the dance community. He's still directing Culture Shock San Diego today. So shout out to Sean.
Yeah.
I think we've literally grown up sleepers with a lot of San Diego dancers who never really got to dance together. So we were rehearsing for, I think, a fusion performance. And after rehearsal, we went to get Mexican food. Very San Diego thing to do.
Where'd you go?
I don't even remember the name of it because there's so many awesome Mexican food places.
Real Mexican food, not Tex-Mex?
Yeah, not hating the Tex-Mex, but it just hits differently in San Diego.
I'll go on record. I don't care.
But yeah, we were literally just getting food and just having, dance convos. A lot of the people, there's like 6 or 7 of us who went to get food that night. Many of them, veterans in the community now. But we literally unfolded a napkin from the restaurant with burritos in hand and tacos in hand. Someone pulled out a pen, and I think it started with 2 or 3 of us talking about it. And we were like, I bet if we tried hard enough, we could trace the majority of the dance community teams in SoCal, or even maybe in California, we could trace some sort of line back to Culture Shock, whether it was like a direct branch or like influenced by. And that's what the napkin became. Just so over like a course of an hour eating Mexican food and talking, I think Loveland like scribed it, and we were just spitting out teams. We put Culture Shock in the center, and then we started branching out. And so I think that this was in 2011, by the way. So the napkin's about 9 years old now. But we did like direct lines of influence, and then I think we did dotted lines for some other relation. But we certainly felt like we filled quite a bit of the napkin up. And so it wasn't anything that we were like, we're going to share this or anything. It was just something we did in kind of like the moment, and thought it was really cool because so many of us at the time had been in the community for at least, 6 to 10 years. So it was just kind of a reminder of our own roots, because again, that was a project where a lot of the dancers, we came from different teams, and it's a reminder of our history. And so I posted it on Tumblr at the time, like one of my 3 whole posts on Tumblr.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, that's when it was like kind of cool, but I never really got into it.
Yeah.
I posted it for my own benefit, just kind of like, I want to come back to this one day because it's a really fragile napkin. And I think Loveland or somebody might still have the napkin. But I posted it on Tumblr, and it, for lack of a better word, it went viral on Tumblr. Yeah. And I would see all of these dancers that I had never met. I didn't even know how they found it in the first place because I wasn't following anybody on Tumblr.
Right. And let me say with that too, right? So you weren't following them. Your Instagram to this day, you follow how many people?
That would be a 0, actually. Yeah.
We'll talk about it in a little bit, but I like that though. I think it's actually kind of a good thing. But go ahead. So, but it's not uncommon for you to not be following dancers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So long story short, social media is a way for me to capture my own memories and moments in time, and not to scroll away or get too engaged on what everybody else is doing. But yeah, I would see these dancers from Future Shock LA, and dancers on Culture Shock DC and dancers in Canada, and they would just share it, and it became kind of this thing, like a hashtag know your roots thing. And I think that I might have did that hashtag in one of my very long-winded
You used hashtags back then?
We did. Yeah, they were actually pretty cool back then, for the record. So
I still don't know how to use them.
Yeah. but yeah, and that it was really, it just kind of blew my mind how quickly that spread amongst the dance community.
It's amazing because even now, looking at the teams and crews that are around now, that napkin, albeit it could probably be 5 or 10 wide now, and it still would trace back to Culture Shock. And I remember seeing the napkin for the first time on a photo because I've never been able to see it live. Although whoever has it, I'll buy it off you straight up. Yeah. But I seen the napkin, and coming from DC or the East Coast, seeing the teams that I was associated with or that knew or was able to dance, or take class with, and just seeing that recognition of, okay, that's the first time I realized the dance community was large and small at the same time. And it's been probably one of the things I've loved most about my dance journey is just the ability to meet people all over the world. A great example, I went to Scotland last year, and there's my buddy Chris now, who's one of my really, really good friends, knows about the SGBM documentary, right?
Yeah.
Like he flipped out when he was like, you liked one of my photos on Instagram. You don't follow me. You liked it. And he goes, J Vaughn, right? And so it's just so cool all over the world. Those that know the history, who appreciate the history, you got to be a creator in that space with that napkin. But then also you've done it again with the documentary I just mentioned, right? And that's the first time I ever saw your face. I think you were shaved head back then.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that I was going to take the way the napkin did, or that, because X did that, right? X is fantastic too.
Yeah, absolutely. And really that was X's baby, at the time in SGBM, we were kind of like turning a new leaf in terms of leadership, in 2009, when KJ and I were directing, only a year after, Kevin and Ben stepped away to do ABDC with Jabba, KJ got married that year. And so that ended his, full-time status and directing on a team. So Ving got promoted to artistic director.
Now call it what it is.
Huh?
Call it what it is. What's the title?
Overlord.
That's right. That's right. I'm showing my SGBM shirt.
Yeah, Ving got promoted to Overlord. He certainly deserved an opportunity because he was just fantastic. Choreographer and dancer. And so, when we brought on that next gen, I think it was Gen 5, there was just this new excitement in the air, and X had danced with 220 before and been in the community for some time. And so, he was also exploring his talents in like the media world as well. So he kind of made the choice to, document our journey with the new generation and our kind of decision to go from an exhibition team for 5 years to a journey into competition. So it was a real unique and I think important time in SGBM's history. And he did all the work, to be honest, and he captured it so beautifully. And the video was meant to, again, it was shared. We watched it at our like end of year banquet, and it was meant for us to kind of like rewatch and revisit our journey. It wasn't necessarily meant to go out to the masses, because again, this was like 2011, 2010, 2011. So, we weren't trying to put ourselves out there or market anything, but all the same, I think looking back, there weren't a lot of teams that kind of captured moments in time or moments in their history the same way X did with us. And so, it kind of took off. And when X said like, hey, I want to interview you and interview Ving and really get into the nitty gritty, I was like, yeah, that's really cool. Like, I bet this is going to be great. So it became much more than we thought it would.
Yeah. I watched it again recently, right? Because, and typically, our conversations, or not ours specifically, but for Grown Talk, I don't do a lot of prep work because I've known that person a decent amount of time, or maybe I haven't. I just want the conversation to be more organic. But because you're my big brother, and because there's so much history here, I felt like out of respect I should go back and do a little bit of due diligence, right? And so I watched it again, and shout out to X, because that documentary has aged so well. I mean, the quality of the production itself, let alone the story and the editing, and it's, I got to tell you, one of my favorite experiences on SGBM was, and this is so corny, was when we're in there one day. I think we're stressed out prepping for a show, and someone plays the cha-cha slide.
Yeah.
And I was like, turn the lights off right now. Let's get the disco ball going. Oh my gosh. And it made me so happy. And so my buddy Chris in Scotland, who I was talking about earlier, that's one thing that I got to share with him. Was like, I got to do the cha-cha slide when I was on SGBM.
Freeze! Everybody clap your hands. Come on, y'all. Take it out, y'all. I know you need it. There you go. Bring it to the top.
Forget dancing on stage for Body Rock, forget going to UP, or getting classes from all the fam and Java and all of us. No, that was one of my favorite memories. And that team is just so special to me, and to you too. You've been there for so long. You're still helping out with SGBM. So let's talk about SGBM history, right? So
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about SGBM and where it stands historically in the San Diego dance community, and then kind of how it forms within FAM.
Yeah, so SGBM was formed in November of 2005. So at the time, there's still just a handful of teams in San Diego. And I think at the time, the community at large is kind of evolving in terms of styles, and, we were growing together, and, the level of intensity and musicality and artistry that exists today just existed in a very different shape and form back then. And so Kevin Brewer of Jabba, no stranger to, I'm sure, anybody listening today. Yeah. So he was obviously on Jabba and has a huge, long history. I got to chat with him on a IG Live a couple of weeks ago. So
he's teaching today, actually.
He is. Yes, he's teaching on the Jabba IG Live
right now.
In about 30 minutes.
I'm being disrespectful. I'm so sorry, KV. Okay, but so he's around.
Yeah, so he had moved down from Sacramento and joined Culture Shock San Diego with Joe Larat. And, after his time with Culture Shock, he would just invite a bunch of dancers to a studio, during the summer months, to just vibe, to get down, a place where he can kind of pour into to dancers. And he enjoyed that so much that he officially decided to start a team. And the other thing that influenced him is, Joe and Phil, Tayag, are basically his best friends. And Phil started Boogie Monstars in 2003, up in Sac. And then Joe was already kind of working with a group that would eventually become the Press Play that we know. Yeah. But basically KB was a little jealous and wanted to start a team of his own because his best friends had teams. And so, he basically said, I'm going to start a team of my own, and I'm just going to call it the Super Galactic Beat Manipulators. And he did it with so much excitement. We were all like, where did you even pull that name? Where did that name even come from? But he's just kind of he's just a creative genius. And if you've ever had a conversation with him, there's no one else like him. So in November of 2015, officially held auditions. I was dancing for Urban FX at the time, but KJ Gonzalez, who was my director on Urban FX, left, and then eventually joined SGBM, along with several other names in the community that were pretty well established. And so I ended up joining what we refer to as Gen 2. We had auditions like 8 months after the first audition, and that's when like Ving and I joined the team as well. So the summer of 2006. But yeah, I mean, I think at the time, looking back on it, I think people were really like inspired by what SGBM was, because it was very different from everything else back in 2005. At the time, the community and like the heavy hitters like Culture Shock and Urban FX and Funkonometry. I haven't
heard that name ever.
Oh, one of my favorite teams of all time, heavily influenced my style, was Funk's. The three of them, like artistically and the way they express themselves, are very, very different, right? Like Culture Shock, very rooted in hip hop and in those styles, and Urban FX, which I danced for 2 years, definitely had more of a commercial feel. We definitely danced to more pop music. Our movement was super high energy, very fast, very flashy, meant for like commercial consumption in a lot of ways.
Sure, yeah.
In San Diego, and the other teams like Formality had kind of moved on to Temecula by then. 220 was still very much like a collegiate team doing their thing, very dope. But because of the Jabberwocky like influence, and then just kind of like some of the names that came on board with the first gen SGBM, there wasn't really a team that moved like SGBM, that really like leaned into the musicality and leaned into like instrumentals and really just made it about like the music and the connection to the music versus doing something for showmanship.
Right.
Because by then, like Culture Shock had produced some super iconic sets, like what we refer to as like the Asian medley, and several others that, just jaw droppers. And so SGBM fit something very different at the time, and at the time, certainly there was room for that, and so we just got a lot of love from the community about what that was, and so much so that dancers from LA, like Ben Chung and April Rodriguez and Gina Liu and Toby Vu, who were all like active dancers at the time, would literally carpool down from LA to come to SGBM rehearsals. And
that's a drive, because I tried it for a little bit when I first moved back to LA.
Yeah.
That's, 2.5, 3 hours, depending on which studio we're at and all that. And it's a commitment. And SGBM, I would agree 100%, has its own style, has its own flavor. Musicality was a big one. And I would say my ear has never been as sharp as when I was on that team, and it all made sense compared to a lot of other places that I've danced with, and it felt so natural. And KB is a weird genius, that he is. And I mean that with the most respect. And so what's interesting to me about that story is KB and the boys are all established by then. They're well known, right?
Yeah.
Or, they have their own recognition. They have their team, right? Jabba, who's fantastic. And they decide to, instead of, having another separate group, that they're each going to have their own teams, right? Like we have 3 leaders on that one team who are ready to kind of spawn off. And each one who knows, Boogie, Press Play, and SGBM, anyone who knows FAM knows that these are 3 distinctly different teams under one umbrella. And I had no idea even the history of it until I got on SGBM and we got to go up to SAC, for UP. And I got to, sit down and talk to people from both teams. And it's just, to me, it sounds like KB needed to fill a void, right? Like not even just in himself, but in the dance community, like there was a place to go for them. So back then, was there any pushback on having your own team or building a new team? Or what was the community response, on that? And is it any different than it would be today? Because I know today is a little bit different if you want to start your own team, depending if you have something to say or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't a question that comes up very often. So I'm glad you asked that, and then certainly this is my perspective on this, having grown up in the community during that era. But yeah, and I wouldn't say KB was necessarily trying to fill a void. I think he kind of just acknowledged what he was trying to do would eventually would fill a space that others weren't necessarily exploring. And on top of that, like really inspired the other overlords. Lando Wilkins heavily influenced our first, like 2 years on the team.
Yeah, those sets were definitely blocked, choreographed differently, right? I mean, Lando was very, very artistic and heavy in his direction.
Yeah, and a part of it was because KB had to step away for 6 months because his first child was born and he wanted, dad time. And so, yeah, I know, right? But Lando kind of took the helm artistically, and and KJ and Ben contributed, but they were like some of the hardest pieces I'd ever learned, and they weren't they weren't blocked intricately or what you see today with kind of like all the visuals, because the movement and expectations for execution were so high, you couldn't travel 10 feet with a piece without compromising the integrity of, the execution. Yeah. So, shout out to the original 4 overlords for really just like weaving through that time. Because it really like launched who we would become, for the next decade or so. But going back to the like fam royale ties, and I think at this point, everybody's seeing the way Phil moves. Like he.
Yeah, I love that he's got so much shine.
Yeah, he's one of the most unique movers I have ever seen, still to this day. Yeah. And we're about the same age now. And so I met him when we were, like 20 years old, maybe. And he's had that. That's been his like distinct way of moving.
He's such a G.
Oh my god!
Like that's just like that's the only way I can put it is he's just I don't like using the word swag. I think he just has a G, like he just has his own flow on him, and it translates down to boogie, right?
Yeah, and that was the coolest thing because honestly, and I still think that was untouchable, like that style and truly emulating it. But when I look back on the way that like Boogie Monstars would like conduct rehearsals and like their like real lack of, structure, they were just kind of just doing it and spending as much time as they need to like perfect what they were doing. It was a much more organic process for them than it was like maybe for SGBM. But Phil was able to like successfully get a group of dancers to like emulate, absorb, and replicate that style. And I still think to this day, there's been no other team in the community that's been able to really do that or kind of touch that style in that way. Yeah. Because they were so good at it, like so good at it. And if you haven't watched, I think it was Bust a Groove, Body Rock Bust a Groove. It's either Bust a Groove 05, but it became Body Rock 06. So forgive me, fam, but I think it's Body Rock 06. The first year it became Body Rock. Boogie Monstars won first place.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
Yeah. And it wasn't, again, because of any sort of like flash. It was simply because like you just never seen dancers really move like that. And the quality of movement was so beyond at the time that you couldn't do anything but be like in awe of that. So
yeah, I'm getting chills to think about it because, I knew Boogie and I knew Press Play before I got into FAM, but only through YouTube, right? Yeah. It's just Boogie specifically and that style, anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about needs to look it up. I'll put a link or something. But like that style specifically, you have to watch it live. You have to be 10 feet from it. Yeah. Because then you pick up on the nuances. And at the time coming into the community, I feel like choreography was starting to get really, really fast. Right? Like we were hitting 1E and a 2E and we were like hitting every single sound in there. And it was impressive. It's a skill to have. Anyone who could do that and make it legible is beyond talented, right? It takes a lot of work. But for Boogie, And I guess the overall Java style that kind of comes out of it is so patient, and they pick and choose their moments in a way that to me is more conversational, which is how I grew up in dance, right? It's a conversation sentence, and you figure out where your inflections are at versus speed reading. And it's so dope. But I love that they're still around today.
And in 2020, like Boogie still has the same kind of like, still has the same vibe, the same feel that they did, back in 2003, and they've done such an incredible job passing the torch, artistically and stylistically. And I think that's really hard to do for any team when you think about, at this point, it's 17 years for them. Like that's a testament to like how deep those roots are, not just with Boogie, but with Fam, and Brandon Greathouse, shout out to Brandon up in SAC, really was kind of like the founder of Press Play. And then like Joe and Brandon, and then eventually like Jason Magsusi kind of came together to evolve Press Play to like what it eventually became. And Press Play was like officially established, I think it was like March of 2006, so just 5 months after us. And then we just acknowledged, and it really was Three Muskie, which is Kevin, Joe, and Phil. They really ingrained that in us. They told us the stories. They reminded us why this is important. They validated that these roots are real and that this is family because of the roots and not because of a name, or not because we decided to collaborate. Like the roots, the roots are so deep, and we all took that very, very seriously. And I think that certainly propelled our love for what we do, our love for, dance and the artistic side, along with community, because that meant we had a true dance family, and that helped foster the importance of community beyond maybe what we experience in our own like cities and spaces and studios. But like, even though Press Play and Boogie shared a studio in SAC, like there are sister teams in, from San Diego, they're 500 miles away. And it never was a chore to like stay connected or work together. And we, successfully collaborated on multiple occasions.
One night.
Really a lot of fun and very stressful nights. Every single one of those was worth it. And I, a lot of alumni still talk about how fun those experiences were. So super dope that Fam, and it, like anything else, like it exists in a different capacity and operates a little differently, but like who we are at our core is still very much alive and well. And I think that's the most important.
How do you think that's come to be then, right? Because you both, or I guess all teams have been around for a while. SG specifically, a long time now. I'm doing the math in my head, right?
Turning 15 this year.
Getting their driver's permit. And how have we managed to keep our identity, right? More so than other teams. I feel like SoCal teams in general, for the most part, have been able to kind of keep their roots. Like when I think about 220, right? I feel like they've been consistent for me as a spectator or as a person in the community, pretty thoroughly. Cookies have been, even throughout leadership changes, have been cookies to me overall. SGBM, I mean, those for me were like the top three for a while, and then FX was there as well. But like those three for me were the core coming into the San Diego community, and each one was so unique, and still to this day is unique.
Yeah.
So do you think that's because KB was around so much, or because you were able to be, the conduit between all those gens? How do we do that moving forward even more?
Yeah, I think it's funny when you kind of like zoom out and look at the like journeys for each of those teams. And again, like as far as Cookies and 220 are concerned, I'm sharing my perspective and what I saw from my vantage point. But I'd say for those two teams, it goes back to team culture and really like understanding who you are as a team and what's important, what values, like what's the, for lack of a better term, like what's the mission statement, what's the vision? Those sound like very simplistic, but the truth is, if you're going to like come together and do something and pursue passions together, there needs to be a level of like baseline, like foundation that everybody stands on. And those things are important, I think, as far as I'm concerned about laying your foundation is who are we? What's important to us? You know, what are we trying to express? Who's our intended audience? And we don't always have those conversations as creatives. Sometimes we just get excited and want to create, but we don't go back to like articulate what that is so that when we go to teach the next generation, they clearly understand what that looks like. And I think both of those teams have done a tremendous job passing the torch from generation to generation. And we've operated very differently. You know, 220 has always operated with like a group of leaders that more or less share equal authority and equal responsibility. And so it's like a group effort from a leadership perspective. Cookies is a little bit different. Like they tend to lean into their artistic directors a little bit more. But when you look at the roots of Cookies from like Emmett Agape to Kristen Aguinaldo to Jeff Morales, and then eventually to like, you know, Keone, and then to Carlo and Chris and so on, like they were always kind of part of this 429, Studio 429 in San Diego, one of the most iconic and like best studios I've ever had a chance to be a part of. You know, their roots are so deep. I don't think it was difficult to like pass that torch from gen to gen. But for SGBM, you know, the reality is KB, who formed the team in late 2005, really stepped away at the beginning of 2008. So he was there for the very like, the formative years. And then it became up to the rest of us to really like continue that. And when I got into the whole reason why I became a leader on SGBM was because very quickly, Ben and KB stepped away for America's Best Dance Crew. You know, when you get the call that you're going to be on a show like that, it happens pretty fast. And so I was already helping with admin work on the side. I guess I had a knack for that at the time, and already served in some leadership capacities in my, you know, previous teams as well. So I ended up, you know, getting promoted to admin director to help at least operationally make sure the team was still moving. And then by then Lando had kind of like left the team and wanted to really pursue like his own artistic pursuits. And so it was me and KJ was the artistic director. But we both had known KB, you know, since the Jabba days. And we totally, you know, we totally know what SGBM is and was. And it became our job to like encapsulate what KB's vision was and, you know, where we had, you know, how we had grown and what was important to us. Like we were still developing that a couple years in. And then when the next year when KJ retired and Ving stepped up, like, again, I ended up being a director I was on the team for 9 years and directed for 7. And at the top of my mind for all 7 years and from gen to gen to gen was the priority for me as a director was to make sure that SGBM keeps the integrity of who we are at our core.
From a value standpoint? Like historically and... I guess that's my question too, right? And I understand and I appreciate that because I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll share, you know, you've traveled with me back to Virginia a couple of times now with the team that I was able to co-found Dope in Virginia Tech, and they just had their 10-year, right? Yep. And so we've had our own history as well. But for us, we're a collegiate team. So it's a little bit different because, you know, you have hopefully all 4 years and then there's a change in leadership and this is a little bit harder. And for us, it was really based around serving the community. We still provide the free class once a week, which I think is fantastic. And their skill level has just jumped up out of nowhere the last couple of years. But stylistically, I've seen that team, right? My team, not even just evolve, but change in different directions. And I feel like SGBM for the most part has been decently consistent with it. So when we're talking about passing the torch, where does style fit into that?
Yeah, I think so. I'll share that like one of the core values. And, I feel like I established the terminology for it and added some structure in my time, again, to be able to very clearly articulate when you join this team, this is what to expect. And this is what's important to us. Yeah. And hopefully you'll discover that that's important to you in some shape or form as well. There's a piece of that you can take with you. But one of the values that SGBM holds closely is exploration. And that goes back to the original four overlords. Like when you think about KB, Ben, KJ, and Lando, they don't move. Like they don't choreograph the same. They don't artistically express themselves the same. Yeah. You might argue that like Lando and KB have some similarities, and that's because very much like Lando is certainly influenced by KB. But like when you get to the nitty gritty, learning the pieces from Lando was very different than learning from KB. Already since Gen 1, SGBM had four, artistic leaders that were very different. And KB very much embraced the idea that we would take all of this, like all these different avenues and just make it work together.
Right.
And so when I talk about wanting to encapsulate what KB created, to protect the integrity of who we are at our core, that was my job as a director as well. When I got a new wave of dancers, like say in Gen 7 in 2012, they stand out in my mind because a lot of dancers who had already had a dance experience in the community, Gen 7 specifically, a lot of them joined SGBM. And so was very familiar with some of the dancers, may not have known them very well, but I'm like, yeah, I know that person teaches class and I know that person's a choreographer and whatnot. So as a director, it's my job, again, to look at like artistically what's in front of me and how do we bring that together to create whatever it is we want to do on stage. And when I talk to SGBM generation after generation, I always tell them, like, just go back to the body rock performances. You can skip every other, performance out there and just watch body rock from '06 all the way up till, now. And you'll see that the medleys are very different as far as like the vision and maybe the artistic, idea on there. But who we are at our core is still in there. The idea that we will take multiple styles. Sometimes we'll tap into some like foundational or street styles and want to throw that in there. It really just depended on the generation. And that became important to us. And as a director, it became important to me that we didn't like create this formula or create this mold that we would just kind of replicate. And certainly no shade to teams that do that, because it absolutely happens. Because when you have a formula that works for you, why not replicate it, right? Whether that's a formula that gets you trophies or a formula that makes the process efficient and easy for everybody, like replicate whatever's important to you. But what was important to us and to me was the idea that we would continue to try new things. And did we always like hit the mark? Not every time, but I'd rather say that we gave that a try and be criticized for it than say we did the same thing over and over and over and left people uninspired. Yeah. And that's just my personal take on like how I wanted to lead that process. But yeah, I look back at like Body Rock, like 2008 and Body Rock in 2013, the casts are very different. But like the idea of like introducing different styles and like really merging that together, that's still ingrained in who we are. And I'd like to think that shows up in like the majority of our performances.
Yeah, I think SGBM is always good for an all style section for the most part, right? Or some type of style. And I'm very lucky to have a exposure, I won't say foundation, but exposure to many different styles coming up. And I remember, I forget which set it was. I'm thankful it wasn't Body Rock, but it was one of the performances. And they go, "Hey, Andrew, you're going to be one of the B-boys." And I said, oh. I was like, okay. And so, there's only 4 or 5 of us on stage and I'm doing CCs and I'm like rolling around. I really have no idea what I'm doing, except for like, what minimal foundation I do have. And if you look close, I think it was UP, there's one section where we're doing CCs and I literally just kind of sit down for a little bit, like my butt's on the ground, like, oh, this is not working.
Right.
But it's just one of the things that I loved about SGBM and why I was very lucky that SGBM and you and the council at the time had let me on midway through a season is because that there was an appreciation for all styles, for exploration. And I knew that going into the team, and you guys delivered every time. And one of the things I get worried about, or that we talk about, and a lot of leaders in the community talk about, is as we get into this next season of our community, right? And the new gen is coming up. They're either going into existing teams or they're making their own teams. And so for those that are going into existing teams, I think there's kind of 2 ways I've seen the new gen come about it. And either they come in understanding the roots and wanting to grow those roots and expound upon the legacy, or they really want to come in and make a mark, with what they can do for it. And I don't know if one is really wrong or right, but being a director was around for 7 years as a director, seeing a lot of very, very talented dancers come up, a lot of good choreographers come on your team, right? While you're host or directing, how do you manage that part of it?
Yeah, I think, I reflect back and we're like finally getting to answering this question you asked, 20 minutes ago, right?
Don't worry, I'm good. I'm getting back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because I would argue, back in the early 2000s, there was certainly like a hierarchy to the dance community or the way you pursued, kind of your dance journey.
What do you mean?
There weren't really all males. There's just a handful of them. So that wasn't really like a starting ground for a lot of people. It might have been for some. And then there was really only like Future Shock as one of the few junior teams available. So if you came on as a collegiate dancer, it was 220, or it was Formality. Formality wasn't collegiate because it wasn't tied to a college, and it didn't, the way you describe what happens with dope at Virginia Tech, we didn't rotate leaders every couple of years because they graduated or anything like that. I've literally named 3 teams in the community. And then from there, it was the exhibition team. So there almost had to be this rite of passage for like, if you were coming into the community and you were young, it was a junior team, obviously. Or unless you're Kevin Belisario, you're 9 years old and you joined Formality and danced with a bunch of adults.
Wait, but Kev was on Formality?
Yeah, we danced together. We're like literally.
That makes so much sense when I watch him now.
Yeah, I was 18. He was 9, and now he's on.
So much sense when I watch him now.
Cookies now, and he's like 6 feet tall. It kind of blows your.
He's one of my favorite movers right now.
Oh, he's fantastic, and it's because he learned like so many styles and went to like an art school, and he's like the nicest guy in the world. So.
Yeah, he is. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, and then there was the exhibition teams, and I think I would argue most of us viewed the exhibition teams like Urban FX, Culture Shock, and like Funks and Culture Shock LA. And, the exhibition teams were really like the cream of the crop, and like the best dancers in the community were on those teams. So you almost had to like earn your way into one of those teams. So you would graduate from a competition team onto an exhibition team when people felt you were ready to do so.
Wait, you graduated from a competition to an exhibition?
Yes. That's essentially,
really?
Yeah. And I don't know that was necessarily on purpose, but it was just at the time. Culture Shock San Diego was arguably like the best team in the country.
Yeah.
In 2000, in 2002, I don't imagine there was another team doing what they were doing at the level they were doing. Now we could never maybe prove that, but they were so freaking good. I hope somebody can prove me wrong. Like that's how mind blow. And so when you're on 220 or you're on Formality, you might love it there, and well, for 220 you'll graduate out eventually. But the dream would be to be on a team like Culture Shock and dance alongside, because dancers on Culture Shock, Urban FX, Funks, a lot of them were also industry dancers at the time. So they were driving up to LA and doing the auditions. And that's, people wanted to be a part of that, especially if you wanted to pursue dance as a career. The goal was certainly to learn from what would be considered the best at the time. And so that's what I mean by like hierarchy. You had to graduate into an exhibition team. And I think what happened eventually is, like, over the years, if enough 220 dancers graduate out there, and these dancers still want to dance, but there's not enough room on these exhibition teams, something else has to take shape to give these dancers a home, right? And so eventually other teams would sprout. And I would argue that's essentially how, probably at a real like simple level, how our community has grown since I joined in 2001 is like, you know what, more people are getting into this, but you can't have teams that are like 60, 70 people deep. Eventually something else has to take shape, and somebody's going to have to lead those situations. And so, you might have the occasional dancer step up and say like, hey, I've got a vision and I want to start something my own. And I feel like I have enough support from the people around me to be able to do this. And it's not unlike the same way KB said, I want to start a team because my best friends have one and I've got something to say. He just happens to be KB. So hell yeah, people are going to follow him. Right. But other people may not have the same, following, but they certainly, teams like, not a lot of people know that there was a Funks SD chapter for a little while.
I didn't know that.
It didn't live for a long period of time. But again, certainly there were leaders who worked with the Funkonometry name, because there was a Funks LA, and then eventually Emerson Aquino founded Funks SF.
That's one of my favorite teams.
Yes, absolutely. Also one of the most iconic teams in our community's history as well, and also fostered so many amazing dancers that we have all over the industry at this point.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Little known fact, when I founded Morse All Male in 2001, Emerson was the director of 220, and he was my all male coach, because his little brother, Elmer, was my co-captain. So again, very small world. And I've known Emerson since I was in high school. And shout out to Emerson, who's done incredible work for the community for what
that's
feels
definitely
like
a community name everybody needs to know as well.
Absolutely. So,
but I think I like that you say that, and that perspective is so great, because this is how I know you're my big brother and why you're a great mentor to me, and you help me grow and evolve my thinking. Because I would say that even a couple of years ago, I would have said something like, "Why are all these young bucks starting teams?"
Yeah.
Right? Because the initial thought is, why not, to your point, go in, join a team, earn your stripes, fight your way on stage. And, some people don't, my thought was, some people don't want to put that work in. They just want to get on stage.
Sure.
Right. But I think what you said is absolutely valid, that sometimes there is not enough space for everyone on a team, and we need to have growth, and that's how we do grow. Yep. And then, one thing that you said that I think resonated with me is, if someone has already put that time in or that work in, then we should absolutely let them explore their directive creative side on a different scale, on a different level. Right. Like, I think what people have a problem with is if someone who's only been dancing for 2 years really, hasn't, doesn't know their sevens from their eights and, all that stuff. And they want to go start a team. Well, if it's with their friends, that's fine. Do your thing, have fun. But when you want to compete with the best of the best, it seemed disrespectful at the time. And I don't know if it needed to be that way. I think we're the old guard, and we want to kind of protect it a little bit. And I think what you said and how you foster the community is very, very beautiful.
Yeah. And, it goes back to, and thank you for that, but I think it goes back to, like, looking back on it now, like, when I was leading SGBM, the exploration being like a core value of the team.
Yeah.
Like I was never the artistic director because I never felt like I had to fill those shoes. And it certainly wasn't my strength. I can certainly have a vision and say, this is how I want to storyboard our medley, and I know how to like tap into the talent to bring that vision to life. That was more exciting for me than actually creating or choreographing a piece, because it aligns more with my passion and my skill set, right? So the goal for me always was to foster an environment through that exploration, that value that I value so much, to like inspire my dancers to want to create, give them the platform to try something new, because there's a lot of hungry choreographers out there who never get their shot on a team.
Yes.
Right? Because maybe their artistic directors or their artistic, council or group is well established and there's no like getting in there at some point. Sometimes dancers just get so hungry they want to be able to express themselves in a different like avenue or format, and sometimes that shows up in the form of like a project where they kind of get it out their system and they do it one and done, or they do it for a season or two, a couple performances here and there, and other times they're inspired to like lead others and start new teams. And many of, the dancers that I've worked with in my career have absolutely moved on to, teams that are higher caliber and start their own teams and start their own project. And I'm absolutely thrilled for them, because if they get to practice or they get to explore themselves in a space that I've helped create, then hell yeah, like go contribute something great to the community, because I'm not going to let crappy people on my team, people with bad intentions. I felt like that was important to me to filter through like why you were here. But like, if you're in and you want to be a part of this, for 2 or 3 years or 4 years or whatever, and then eventually move on to do something, I think that's my responsibility to help you do that in the community. If I see your vision and I see what you want to do and I can help you with that, then as a leader, I almost feel obligated to do so. And I know not every community sees it that way, or every team or every studio, where, sometimes we're reluctant to share our dancers, or we get a little bitter when someone like moves on to another team, and there can always be that animosity. And believe me, like the San Diego community has its fair share of that. Like when Urban FX broke off from Culture Shock, like that was not a very pretty picture for a little while.
I remember,
but eventually, but when you think about it, like if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have Urban FX, who very much fit their own mold and their own space very separately from Culture Shock. And even though it wasn't like an ideal way for that to happen, like ultimately all the drama was squashed and everybody was good. But then you think about, and then from there, Culture Shock continued to inspire these people and these teams, and then Urban FX continue to inspire these people and these teams, and that just becomes the natural kind of like evolution of things. It's not always pretty, and people aren't always happy about it. But that's one thing I've learned. You kind of have to roll with it, and you want to be able to do the best you can with what happens. So I've learned it's safer to be on the supportive side and say like, you know what, like, that sounds a little risky, but like, I support you, go do it. I'm here if you need anything. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But like, again, I think I'm aligned with the mentality that they would rather have tried and failed than not, or stayed on the team and were unhappy because they didn't get their shot to like, contribute the way they wanted to. So
that makes sense, especially when I think about the roster of SGBM through over the years. I mean, our team has definitely been a launching pad for many great creatives, on and off stage. And to your point, a lot of people who want to go do their own projects or have their own teams are moving different, like physically moving different. Like Seeson's a great example. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like with the most, like he has a very unique style that's to him, and it looks really good on stage for him and how he blocks it. And only he could do what he wanted to do and, convince him. in Houston, Dom with It's a Wave. Like, I think he had something to say and he wanted to move a certain way, and he found people that were like-minded, and that wouldn't fit on every team. And I think he had to do that. And so, yeah, it makes complete sense to me. And I'm glad you share that, because I think that's a mature level of directorship, of community leadership on it. And that kind of segues into, now that you have grown up through the dance community, you're actually retired from directing. I think what's the title we have now for you on SGBM?
I'm team owner, which is a horrible title, but I couldn't find a better one, because
maybe it should be like a GM.
A general manager. Yeah. And I do equate it to like a sports team, right? Because the brand or the name or the team is like under my care, but I'm not not the coach. I don't work directly with the players themselves.
I give you GM.
GM. I don't know why I didn't think of that, because owner sounds terrible. And my job is to make sure leadership.
KB's the owner, right? Like, so KB's the owner, and then you're the GM. I'll give you that.
KB's founder. I think he would appreciate the title of founder more than anything else.
Yeah, so, owner gets weird.
It does, yes.
So we've talked about this before too, but you've given up professional opportunities. Let's call it as you've given up professional opportunities in the real world, right? To support SGBM and the dance community. And you've done that for, over a decade. And this is really the first time, at least in our friendship, that I've seen, you putting dance second, right? Or at least equal with other parts of priorities in your life. So, do you regret any of that at all? Or, how does that translate to your life now?
Yeah, I think, and this is a question I get a lot.
It's important. I think a lot of, sorry to cut you off, but I think one of the reasons why this podcast has taken off with our general friendship and our friends in our circles is because we have a lot of people our age, right? We're in our, well, I'm in my 30s.
I am
almost 30.
I am 36 years old. I will say that
I was going to say almost 30, but you are my big brother. So we're in our 30s. We have a lot of our friends are dancing, and either at this age, right, they've been dancing for a while now, and either they're choosing to make it a career and doubling down on that, or they're getting into their careers or their families or whatever. So there's a transitional period happening with a lot of our peer group. So that's why I asked the question, because we all approach it differently. And I feel like we don't talk about it enough during that time. Like during that time, we talk about where we're going to eat after practice. Right? Yeah, we need to be talking about, how is work? How's your family doing? Like how's all that stuff. So, you chose dance heavy though early on.
I did, and it was. I think it was really fueled by my desire to be a part of community. Community has always been at the forefront of why I stayed so long, or why I am still a part of, the community in my own capacity now, because it's important to me. And as it is for a lot of people. And I recognize that as time went on, there weren't always a lot of leaders being vocal about things that dance teams and future leaders probably need to know that would help them in their journeys. We're so good about inspiring each other artistically because it's tangible, it's visible. I can watch a video and be inspired and be blown away, and that will give me some juice to that'll fuel the next artistic choice that I make.
I get it, 100%.
But we don't always get the leadership side of it, and that's why that was important to me. And so I think I was lucky to find a career, and I'm in retail management and technically now in retail visual merchandising. But I got to learn what it meant to be a leader, both with dance and in my career simultaneously. So I was working through the ranks with my brand as a leader, and making mistakes. And I got to like take these learnings from each side and like really help develop my skills in both areas. And I got a full-time job when I was 24. And it wasn't because I wanted to, it was because I had to. My like mental health situation, my financial health situation at the time put me at a place where like, this is what you have to do in order to, you kind of like move forward in life. But I refused to give up dancing on a team. And at the time I was on, SGBM, I had just become a director, but going full time at work meant I had to give up my classes. So I was a regular teacher in 3 studios for about 5 years as well. And one of my favorite things to do is teach, specifically teach beginning, which in hindsight is really hard. It's much harder than teaching an advanced class.
One of my favorite things to do. And that's selfishly, this is one of the reasons why I ask you to go to Virginia with me all the time, is because I always ask you to teach the beginner classes. Yeah. It's really not even for the doplings or like Virginia. It's because I want the foundation classes from you. It's hard to teach good beginner like movement intention. I think you do really, really well at it. So to give that up, I know how hard that can be.
Yeah, that was really difficult. It was just too hard to balance, a 40-hour work week. And then, after an 8-hour, 9-hour day, have the mental capacity to lead a bunch of students, even for an hour. That hour can take a lot out of you, as many of you know, who teach out there. But yeah, I still prioritized dance because it was just that important to me. And not to say that I didn't love my job enough to make it the priority, but I knew it was a means to an end. I needed the paycheck, and simultaneously acknowledge like I got to like again learn a lot of leadership skills professionally that applied with dance. And so I felt like I was able to kind of like stack my learnings very, very quickly because of both of these things. And because of that, that also motivated me to stay in the community and stay directing, because I got excited to apply my learnings as a leader onto SGBM and with the other, members of the community that I would interact with. Like the same way I would get excited when I got to like promote one of my leaders in my store to their next assignment because I'd been developing them and getting them ready for that next thing, was the same way I got excited when I got to help unlock the potential or the talent in a future choreographer or a choreographer who didn't know how to teach. And I got to help them and give them feedback and help develop their ability to teach and translate their artistic vision. I got equally excited about both of those things. So I think those things fueled each other for me. And maybe that's certainly not the case for everybody, but yeah, I think I had to give up a lot of things because, when you're working and in retail, you don't work Monday through Friday, like 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, like your schedule is all over the freaking place. And I remember having to work like 11 to 8 p.m. and then having to lead rehearsal from like 9 to midnight, like eating on the road. And, the older I got, the harder that became. Yeah. Like yes. your body, and if you're young out there in your early 20s, like we joke about it like we're like old people, but like your body really does evolve a lot in like your late 20s, and it really pushes back on like what it allows you to do. And so, yeah, I felt like I had to make a lot of compromises, not only for my health, and I'll be honest, that was a poor decision on my part, but also like I didn't have much of a social life because all my friends were dancers. So I relied heavily on those, wanting to create that really great, fun, engaging experience in rehearsals, because that was like the most of my social experiences. Hence the cha-cha slide, like had to find ways to make it fun in rehearsals, because I wasn't, going to go hang out with my friends, afterwards or on the weekend. I was just way too busy, working all those hours and then directing a team. It's a lot of work. Directing a team is a lot of work, especially if you want to do well. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. I think you said something that was really important, which was that you were able to take learnings from both sides and cross-pollinate, right? Because if you don't do that, then I feel like you get torn into two, right? You have a dance side and you have a professional side. And that becomes extremely taxing. And that doesn't necessarily mean each one's going to get half. I think they actually get less than half of each, because you have travel time, you have that we talked about recovery time, and it gets so tiring. So it's important to have the ability to apply lessons from one to the other. And it also, I think it also helps out with your happiness overall, because you don't have to shut it off, right? Like you don't have to be at work and go, well, I can't think about this new dancer and how I'm going to help them out right now. Like I have to focus on work. You get little wins throughout the day. And I think that's really important why you've been successful doing that. But also, I think you also mentioned the fact that not all choreographers are great teachers. Right? And we talk about this a lot too, is you can be a great dancer, but that's different than being a choreographer, which is different than being a teacher, different than being a director, different than being, a visual artistic director versus an admin director, right? All these different things. Do you think that actually played out to your benefit, that you were self-aware to go, I don't need to be an artistic director right now or full-time in any way. I can help out. I can, play a different role.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to maybe some of my learnings in my professional world is like you leverage your skills, right? And ultimately people are going to be happier when they feel like they're contributing something and when they're working with the skills that they're passionate about. I think at a young age, I think maybe by the time I was 23, I had realized that like I did not want to be an artistic like director or like a main contributor.
You decided that?
I made a cognizant choice. And by then, I had traveled up and down California and I've taught the classes and had my fair share of like meeting the community and teaching classes at different studios. And I enjoyed teaching. But again, that's teaching a classroom session is very different than like taking on producing a medley, right? Because that can be weeks and weeks of work. I just discovered that that's not where my passion was. My passion became, like talent development and leadership. And I was much more interested in tapping into the talent around me and bringing them up to help produce the artistic side. And going back to the value, the exploration piece, like that's how I was ultimately going to be able to accomplish that, was making sure that everybody felt like they had their say. I wanted everybody to feel like this is your team too. This is your experience. I don't want this to be like you just show up, you do what we say, you learn your counts, you do the push-ups, you do the run-throughs we tell you, and like we're gonna have a great performance. Like that was never my experience in any of the teams that I danced on, and I didn't want it to be the experience for any of the dancers that were under my direction as well. So
how is it now or how do you feel now that you've transitioned more into your professional career? You moved to Long Beach to take a position.
Yeah.
Right. You've recently taken on more responsibility. So I think, very blessed to have a job right now with everything going on, and then come out of it with more responsibility. Right. So you're continuing to be developed and groomed right now. So how has that transition been for you?
5 years ago, 2015, I officially retired from, directing SGBM. And then in 2018, I came back and kind of took the team under the capacity we'll call it general manager, since 2018, right? And so I brought back Sai to kind of lead the team.
Ooh,
and so, love Sai and thankful for all the work he's done. But it definitely became a choice. I gave up directing at 31, which is certainly much later than most dancers. But I found the perfect window of time to do so. And I, at the time found the perfect group to pass the torch on to. And that way I could pursue, all the things I wanted to do professionally without having to also my body wasn't as nice to me about all the choices I had made on that side of things. But I think like I said earlier, I still want to operate in the community where I feel like excited to. And there's always going to be a next generation in our community that
Right.
never ends. But there's still a lot of now, like I'd say a lot of the community leaders now are a lot of the dancers that were, kids I watched grow up, that were anywhere from like 5 to 10 years younger than me. They're the ones kind of leading, and they're the heads of their teams, or they're like figures in the community or in the social media world who are influencing dancers now globally. And so I still think that all the things I learned from my time as the sponge I described back on my like Formality days, all the things I learned from teams like Formality and Urban FX and SGBM, like I think there's a lot of important lessons there that, again, today's leaders can learn from. And I think my point of view on that is valid. And I continue to have those conversations with leaders now, not just in SoCal, but kind of like wherever I travel. So like even getting to go see you in Houston and you and Tay, and then kind of like being reacquainted and getting to know like Soundbox a bit more. These are some conversations I have with like, Dewey and Calvin and Andrew out there now, because we're kind of like from a very similar generation. And so there's still a lot of like-minded leaders out there who think it's important to continue to pour into future generations so that we preserve like what's important to us, and so that's the work I do now. Which is still really exciting because I get to do it on my own time, and work does get to take the priority now, and I don't have to burn myself out, and I can say no to some opportunities because it's the right thing to do. And I don't feel the pressure to say yes to things the same way I did in my youth because I was, overly zealous about an opportunity or something. So it's nice. It's nice to not have to worry about those things anymore.
See, I think that's something that I'm learning now, even more recently, that you do really well is you pick and choose your opportunities and you are able to say no. My first go-to anytime someone asks me anything is to, we could do that. Or we can knock it out, right? And, it took me a while to figure out, why that is the case. And it's like, man, am I trying to people please? Am I just wanting to get things done? Am I wanting to accomplish things and check boxes? And I think for me, it's I don't want to say youthful, but for now, I'll call it youthful naivety because I'm just like, in my mind, I can still do everything I want to do, right? Like I can still be an astronaut tomorrow. Right. I mean, SpaceX, everything right now. So like, in my mind, that's still the case. And that's not to say that that's not true, but growing older and being more mature now, I have to be smart with my time equity, right? And like how I divide up what that is. And if I only have 24 hours in a day, I need to be conscious of, okay, well, here's how many hours I have to sleep. Here's how many hours I have, because it's not just how much time do I have to accomplish this. As a grown up now, I have to go, how much time do I have for Tay and Elijah or myself, right? Because that's something I've learned the last couple of years is my love language is that new 6 love language of just separation a little bit, of just finding time for me. So it's just one of those things. And I think you've done really well with that because you've had a couple opportunities recently you said no to, and it actually worked out to your benefits professionally.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you had taken those roles, you might be living with me.
I'd be in a very different place. Yeah. And it's, I think in situations like that, it feels you trust your gut. And then in other situations, like especially around dance, like I believe the idea of like you truly make time for what's important to you, or on the flip side, if it's important to you, you'll make time for it or figure out a way to make time for it. I think when you strip away the noise, like that's really what it comes down to, and if I see an opportunity out there where I think I can add value, I'm more inclined to say yes, because I do want to be helpful and supportive out there in the community. And other times, like I look at it and maybe the timing isn't right, even though I might want to help, and I have to learn to say that, like, that can't be the priority right now. So it's a little bit easier to say no to some of those things because it just may not be as important to you, and that's okay, right? Like you don't have to feel bad,
but it's okay, And I think part of it, when I dig down deep, it's twofold. I think part of it is just one, if I say no, my old thought process was if I said no, I was saying no to you as a person versus the request. Sure. And so that devalued whatever relationship we have. And I hated that. But now I know that's not the case. And then the other thing too is I wanted to say yes because growing up as a young leader in the military or just a young professional, the guidance was for a brand new person to always raise your hand and go, I'll volunteer. I'll do this. Right. But I didn't realize until, much later that that's because you want exposure. You want to be able to learn new skills, to network, there's so many different reasons to raise your hand. But once you understand what that is and what your role is and you're self-aware as you are, then you can start saying no, and things you do say yes to, you have immense value to.
Yeah. And it really does go back to, like, I think it's just a part of life, right? Like the more experience you gain and you build, you learn about yourself. And what was important to you in one season of your life might not be important to you in another season. And whether that season is a year or it's 5 years or 10 years or 3 months, like that's just how life works. And so you do have to kind of like step back and kind of like understand and reflect on like what that change looks and feels like, and what's important to you. How do you want to spend your time? Which is, the saying is true. The older you get, the smaller your circle becomes. Sure, simply because you simply just discovered who you want to spend your time with, and whether that's simple things like having coffee with, or they're having like deeper, like meaningful conversations. That's just part of it.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's no
wrong.
Yeah. I think you do have to say yes initially. I think for the simple fact of you have to figure out what you like and what you don't like, or what you're capable of doing. And so there's a level of fearlessness and acceptance of the fact that you're going to fail at a couple of things by saying yes, but you have to take those moments in and learn from them. So that one, you can either tell yourself, I failed because I didn't know how to do this, so now I need to go learn this skill or trait or whatever it is. Or I failed because I'm not really interested in this. This actually doesn't something I really want to do. So maybe we shouldn't do this ever again. Right. And I see you doing that more and more. And so you've seemingly, have made some really good choices in your life. And, kind of one last question before we start wrapping things up is, because you've made some really good choices since I've known you, right? How have you dealt with, you don't have to give me an example here, but maybe a time where you said yes, or you volunteered, you put your hand up and it didn't go the way you wanted it to go?
Yeah, I think sometimes when you say yes to some opportunities, it means you're learning to like work with people in different capacities and in new spaces that you haven't before. Oh, okay. Right. So I think sometimes it's almost like you have this friend that you've known for maybe a couple of years and you get along really great. Or you have, you're in a relationship and things are going really well, and then you decide to like move in together or become roommates with your friend or your significant other, and then you begin to learn like a lot more about them because it's a new environment, it's a new it's a new space, and as you kind of like peel the onion layers back about but in terms of like who people are, like sometimes you discover different sides of people that you didn't see before. And that helps, again, influence, some of the choices you make. And certainly in my time in leadership, like something I learned in my professional world that is very much cross-pollinated into the dance world is like, and I maybe learned this later than I wanted to, is just like, you can't make everybody happy.
Oh, that's fact.
And you absolutely, and it takes more work and more energy to try and please everybody than it does to like stand your ground and like stand behind the decisions that you make, even if it rubs people the wrong way, even if it upsets people, or frankly, even if you lose relationships or friendships over it. You know, I learned that I would rather like, you know, stand for my beliefs and have integrity than compromise any of my values for someone else.
Yeah.
And I learned that in my professional world because that's just how things operate. But we don't do that in the dance world very often. And so I think sometimes we'll let people in the community, you know, get away with certain things and they're not really held accountable. And to be very transparent, I think even in the last like 5 years, I think I have made a cognizant choice to hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And that has probably rubbed people the wrong way. And I don't regret a single moment of that because I found it necessary to do so.
Good.
And because I think that's the sign of a good leader. I think that's what a good leader would do. They would hold themselves accountable to upholding their values, and they would hold other people accountable, regardless of relationship, to right from wrong at the end of the day. And so I think that's been one of the biggest learnings when you know, pursue something that doesn't always work out, is sometimes you have to have these tough conversations.
With yourself even.
That's part of it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I reflect back often about those moments and ask myself, could I have managed those situations differently? Down to the word. Should I have said that word? Was there a better way to phrase that to make them feel differently? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, it comes from a place of care, right? Yeah. You know, it's not a place of like, I gotcha, or like ill intent. It's literally like, you're wrong, or this is how I feel about that. And you need to know that it's serious, you know, but it comes from a place of care because these people you're working with are probably people you chose to work with them because you like them or you care about them. Right. So when it gets to that place, it can get really tough. And I don't think a lot of leaders, you know, I don't think we talk about that enough, what that looks like in the community.
And that's a really big trait or development point for many leaders as they take on more responsibility, right? Like, you know, leading a group of 5 or 10 people is different than leading a group of 20 or 50 or 100. Right? You have to operate differently. And so as you take on more responsibility, in this case, I mean, just the sheer number of people that you're managing or leading, it's a different skill set. You can't expect to be successful doing the same things the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, in my professional world, you know, I could manage, you know, from a leadership team, I'd have 6 or 7 leaders and then up to like 60 to 100 employees. Yeah. You know, managing that is very different than managing 25 dancers who are not on a payroll and not there to like get a paycheck, but they're doing it because of a shared passion. Like understanding how to weave through that and understanding like the why behind why they're there and what they're looking for, and you know, what cultivates the right environment for all of us to thrive. Like it's a lot of work, and that's why leadership is difficult at the end of the day, you know. And I wish we had more conversations about that, because I think there's still a lot of things unsaid that a lot of people can learn from. So
nice. I like that a lot. I have a special guest for you.
Special guest. Who is here? Exactly who I wanted to see.
Taylor.
I feel special.
Hi, Taylor.
Hello.
Hi, Elijah.
This is Elijah's first time on, and I thought it'd be appropriate that he was with
He's in love with the microphone.
He's going to be an MC. Hey, dude. So I wanted to kind of wrap things up with, we talked about a lot of things. I love the dance history conversation. I feel like we have this conversation so much, but I also feel like it's because we both genuinely love the community. We came up in it in different ways, in different places, but it all came together And for me, it's a guilty pleasure to ask you questions. And I realize, I get a direct line into a historian here. But then we also got to talk a lot about leadership, continue to grow up, and all these other things. And so you've seen Elijah since he was a little baby. He's going to watch this again when he's a little bit older, and not dropping things left and right. So what kind of grown up or life advice would you give him so when he looks back on this, he's going to just be able to take something away from it?
Yeah. Hi, Elijah.
Buddy.
I think this is maybe very different from what we spent the last, hour or so talking about, but certainly there's a lot going on in the world like right now, especially in America. And so my advice to you, Elijah, is you, just like your Uncle Jay, are a multiracial baby.
Okay.
And my advice to you would be to embrace every aspect of who you are and your many different backgrounds. And I would encourage you to pursue what that looks like for you. And whatever you find in that journey, and whatever you learn through history, through your parents, your grandparents, and extended family, let that help shape the person that you want to become, because you are allowed to be as Asian as you want to be, as Mexican as you want to be, and no one else can tell you otherwise. And I love you.
Oh, that was...
Oh.
I felt that. It probably wasn't for me, but I felt it anyway.
You're number one.
Number one, Papa J.
Thanks, Jay.
Yay.
All right, Jay, last question is, because I want to continue to have great conversations, who has influenced you, mentored you, or do you think has those traits and qualities that I could reach out to and talk to next?
I can probably help with this one, but I had to think about this one a lot because it was hard.
Yeah.
But he came up in the conversation several times, but I think it really would be KB.
I was hoping you would say KB.
Oh! Yeah. When I think about just his journey, and I've known him for 17, 18 years now.
Yeah.
Same thing. I watched him become a dad, and now he has several kids. I watched him when he met his wife, and they got married. And so it's funny. I look at the both of you, and his wife was a former dancer as well. So it's funny. I see a very young version of what I witnessed back then.
Wait,
and
you're saying
obviously,
KB?
Just like you can be an astronaut, you can be whatever you want to be.
Of course.
I will never tell you no.
I love that. Always supportive.
No, it's funny because I was thinking about it as well, and you had asked me the question before we started, and I was like, I hope he says KB because, but not because of the fam or the mask or anything like that, but because specifically, I know he has kids. I think he has daughters.
He has 4 kids.
Yeah. But and I've met him a couple of times in rehearsal, and he doesn't remember me probably at all ever, which is fine. But he was always super nice to me and would dap me up like he remembered me, and he would mention his kids in rehearsal. And I remember thinking, because Moana had just had his.
He knows KB too. He knows that he's
but he would mention his family in passing. And I remember having a new relationship with Taylor and being like, I hope I can dance and have a family and all these things back then as well.
Yeah. Perfect person to, I could listen to the guy talk for forever. He just has so much to share. But yeah, family's so important to him.
Is he in Vegas now?
Yeah.
Vegas trip?
Yeah.
Okay.
Done.
All right, we'll end it there. I love you, Jay. Here,
love you guys too.
Let me turn this off and then we'll catch up for a little bit. Okay. I actually forgot one question.
Okay. What?
Can you see it?
I can see it.
Yeah. Wait.
Is that yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Really? Oh man.
Yeah.
Yay!
Ah.
I can't believe I forgot
That's-
about it. Like, because they came in. I was like turning everything off, and I was like, I have this note on the ground still. Oh, don't cry.
Are you serious?
Yes.
I did not expect that at all. And now there's both like a lot of joy and simultaneously like a lot of pressure. I've never been a best man before. So
I remember you told me that once, and I was like, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I remember you told me that once. I was like, that can't be right. And I remember when you told me, I decided back in that conversation, like, you would be my best man. And it was,
what?
And it's cool that we get to talk about it on the podcast because, you know, don't you yell, Uncle Jay. No, you're still my best man too. Don't worry. So, no, but we mentioned on the podcast how when I first met Jay, we weren't together. And he got to see us come together, live together, move together, get engaged, have a baby. And now he's going to see us get married. And I wanted you to stand next to me and not between us. Right. You know what I mean? And yeah, man, I'm excited. Thanks for doing that for me.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm honored. I obviously love you guys to pieces. And I didn't expect that. So very cool. Thank you for the honor.
We didn't record anything besides that, actually.
This is too much.
We asked you to do.
Yeah.
No, but I'll share this with you though, because it was I talked about this on another episode, just about how thankful I am for our squad and having men around me. I didn't realize what it meant to have a strong group of male friends around me. And so I took the idea of, picking groomsmen and getting a best man very, very seriously. And there was no doubt. Like, I was like, if anything were to happen, Jay would put me in check. Jay would sit down with us. He would lock us in a room if we had to. Like, there's no doubt in my mind that you, because of everything you've done for us already, like, you've just been always so supportive of our relationship, pushing us forward into the next levels of our lives. And I'm so happy that you said yes.
Oh, of course. As nervous as I am about it now, and probably will be up until the wedding date.
Speech.
Yeah. Oh man, I forgot there's a speech. like a public one too.
No, you can talk too if you want.
That's going to be Papa J at the wedding.
Yeah.
Choking?
I think you just jinxed that. And he's laughing about it. What is happening right now? Yeah. I don't have a fear of public speaking. That's not it at all. It's putting all the words together. But shoot, I guess I'll have to start today. I'll spend the next 9.
Well, we
9
told you the date, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. So be in Houston. I won't say the date because I don't want our 2 followers to come crash our wedding.
True story.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love you. Now let me turn this off and then we'll really catch up.
Okay.
Awesome. Love you guys. Thank you.